An invisible janitor, a billionaire's funeral, a casket ready to descend. What he saw that cold winter afternoon wasn't just an elegant farewell. It was murder disguised as natural death, a plan so perfect it would have worked if he hadn't noticed her chest was still moving. This is the story of how a voiceless man changed the fate of 3 lives forever. The cemetery on the hill looked more like a private gala than a place meant for goodbyes. White tents rippled in the winter wind, and the damp ground swallowed the heels of black shoes. At the edge of the open grave, a silver casket waited polished so clean it reflected the pale sky. Beside it, a marble plaque lay ready in the dirt. Amelia VOSS, beloved visionary, 198-22025. Amelia Voss, tech billionaire, philanthropist, the woman who seemed too strong to ever disappear, lay motionless inside, hands folded over white lily. Her husband, Victor Hawley, stood at the head of the casket in a custom black suit, one hand clutching a monogrammed handkerchief, the other flat on the lid, as if claiming it. The efficient Reverend Cole lifted his Bible, voice trembling just enough to pass as grief. "We gather today," he began, "to commit Amelia Voss to stop." The word tore through the tent like a gunshot. Head snapped toward the entrance. A man in a faded Navy janitor uniform stood in the aisle, chest heaving, hair damp from cold drizzle. A battered backpack hung from one shoulder. His boots were flecked with chemical dust. A name patch on his chest read, Ethan Reed. In his fist was a small, clear, inhaler-sized device, metal and plastic catching the light. "She's breathing." Ethan shouted, voice cracking but loud. "Don't put that casket in the ground. She's not dead." For one stunned second, the entire world seemed to hold its breath. In 2 minutes, Ethan would prove it or be dragged out as a lunatic. Phones rose. A live stream began. Victor's eyes flicked toward a security guard near the tent entrance. A single nod, barely visible. The guard's hand moved to his radio, fingers hovering over the button. He waited. Victor's jaw clenched. His face flickered, grief mask slipping, then reset into polished sorrow. "Sir," he said, cold under a layer of politeness, "you are interrupting a sacred ceremony. My wife is gone. Please step outside so we can say goodbye in peace." Ethan didn't move. He stepped onto the carpeted aisle, worn boots leaving faint, damp prints. There was something in his eyes, raw conviction, that made a few people hesitate. "She's not gone," Ethan said. "Her chest is moving." Her lips changed color minutes ago. A security guard moved forward. "Mr. Reed, you need to leave." "Wait," an older woman near the front said, rising with trembling dignity. Her hair was silver beneath a dark veil, and a small compass brooch caught the light at her collar. "Let him speak." It was Lydia Voss, Amelia's aunt, her mentor, the closest thing she had to a second mother. Victor turned, face tightening. "Aunt Lydia, grief makes people imagine things." "This man is delusional." Ethan lifted the device. "I'm not delusional," he said. "I'm the night janitor at Voss Tower. Yesterday I cleaned the executive lounge outside the medical wing. I heard your private doctor on speakerphone. I heard the words Protocol Zero. I recorded what was said." Victor's eyes darkened at the word recorded. "You brought a gadget," he said softly, almost amused. "You expect us to stop a funeral because a cleaner thinks he overheard medical jargon?" Ethan swallowed. His throat was dry, but his grip didn't loosen. "This isn't just a gadget," he said. "It's a low-power vital sensor, prototype grade. I built it. I used to be an engineer before life collapsed. Her readings are off. Not dead flat, and you rush this burial. Ask yourself why." Lydia's hand trembled on the chair in front of her. "Victor," she said, voice low but firm, "the autopsy was waived. We buried her within 48 hours. That was your insistence, not mine." Victor smiled without warmth. "Amelia left signed medical directives," he replied. "Dr. Rowan followed them. The heart attack was sudden. Keeping her above ground would be cruel. Ethan shook his head. I checked the intake log on my shift, he said. Her body is still warm, not the cold you expect after a full night. And her fingers moved. Most of you didn't see it because you were watching speeches, not her hands. Enough, Victor snapped, the grief mask slipping for a beat. This is obscene. Then prove me wrong, Ethan fired back. 1 minute. Let me scan her. If I'm wrong, I'll walk out and disappear. You'll never see me again. Reverend Cole lowered his Bible. Even the funeral workers hesitated. 1 minute costs us nothing, Lydia said, voice breaking. But if there is even a breath of truth, Victor whipped toward her. You will not let a stranger desecrate your niece's body for attention. Ethan's hand trembled now, but his gaze stayed locked on Lydia. I have a daughter, he said quietly, but the microphone near the podium caught his words and sent them humming through the tent. If I'm wrong, my little girl grows up thinking her dad is crazy. Do you think I would risk that for attention? Lydia's eyes hardened. Open it, she said. Now. 2 funeral workers exchanged glances. One cleared his throat, nervous. Once we break the seal, he said quietly, we can't reseal it cleanly. Mr. Hawley demanded it stay secured until... Open it, Lydia repeated, voice like steel. The workers swallowed. Then... They looked at Victor, then Lydia, then the security guards. Victor's lips pressed into a thin line. You will regret this, he muttered, and stepped back, just enough to look cooperative without surrendering control. Ethan exhaled long and shaky as the workers unlocked the silver latches. Each metallic click seemed to echo through bones. When the lid creaked open, the cold slipped in under the tent. Amelia lay there, still too carefully arranged, hair smoothed back, skin pale but not gray, lashes resting like shadows on her cheeks. A small cotton roll plugged one nostril. No one spoke. Mr. Reed, Reverend Cole asked, voice thin, what exactly are you proposing to do? Check what your doctor should have checked, Ethan replied. He set his backpack beside the casket and took a knee. For a second, he felt hundreds of eyes burn into the back of his uniform, the way people stared when they thought a low-status man dared step out of line. First, he said quietly, we give her lungs a chance to move. He removed the cotton and placed it on the white lining like something poisonous. Then he lifted the scanner, thumb hovering over the button. A green light blinked alive. It reads airflow and chest rise, he said. It won't hurt her, Ethan, Victor said, using his first name like a warning. Stop, Lydia's fingers tightened on the casket edge. Do it, she whispered. Ethan placed the scanner just above Amelia's lips. A flat line pulsed on the tiny screen. Nothing. Victor leaned in, voice barely above a whisper. I warned you. The security guard took a step forward, hand reaching for Ethan's shoulder. Lydia's knees trembled. Her hand shot out to steady herself on the casket edge. Ethan's voice cracked. 10 seconds, he said. Please. He moved the scanner to Amelia's chest, then lower, closer to her heart. The line jittered. A single blip rose and fell. Ethan froze. Again, he whispered. Another blip, higher, then another. The flat line trembled into something fragile and uneven, but real. A heartbeat. It moved, someone gasped. Lydia's knees buckled. She caught herself on the casket. Amelia, she choked. Baby, hold on. Victor lurched forward, face twisting. This is faulty equipment, he shouted. You're all watching a cheap toy. She is dead. Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed for the device. Ethan's fingers closed around Victor's wrist, stopping him halfway. For a split second, the two men locked eyes, one wearing designer grief, the other wearing calloused hands and sleepless nights. Let go, Ethan said, voice unexpectedly calm. Or every person here will remember you as the man who smashed proof instead of facing it. Victor's nostrils flared. Ethan saw it first, just a flicker. Emilia's index finger twitched. Then a faint pulse in her neck, barely visible beneath the pale skin. He swallowed hard. Then, from the casket, a faint sound fluttered up. A thin, broken exhale, so small it might have been imagined. Except it wasn't. Emilia's throat moved. Her chest lifted, shallow, weak but undeniable. People surged, then froze. The funeral workers stood frozen, hands hovering over the casket like they were afraid the wrong touch would turn breath back into silence. Ethan kept the scanner raised, not as proof anymore, but as a shield, because Victor's eyes had changed. They weren't pleading. They were calculating. Chaos rolled through the mourners. Chairs scraped back. Phones shot up, screens flooding with live comments. Lydia leaned over the casket, her tears falling onto Emilia's face. "Sweetheart," she sobbed, "if you can hear me, hold on. Don't you dare let go now." Emilia's fingers twitched again. A second breath came, stronger, ragged, like a swimmer breaking the surface after being held under too long. Reverend Cole stepped back, face pale as paper. Victor's eyes weren't filled with relief. They were filled with fury. "Everyone stay back," he roared, shoving a worker aside with a force that didn't match his earlier softness. His hand dove into his overcoat. Metal flashed. Time narrowed to the pen. A slim injector pen, stainless steel, capped, ready. "What is that?" Lydia whispered. "Victor, what are you doing?" "This is mercy," Victor snarled. "You think she'd want to wake up like this? Weak, damaged, paraded around as a miracle? I loved her. I will not let some janitor drag her back into pain." He raised the injector. Ethan moved without thinking. "Drop it," he shouted, grabbing Victor's forearm. They struggled. The device caught between them. Victor's foot slipped on the wet stone. For a second, both men teetered at the edge of the open grave, mud crumbling beneath their heels. The crowd screamed. Security lunged. Victor kicked him down. "Victor!" Lydia screamed. "Stop!" The injector slipped free. It clattered onto the polished stone near the grave, rolling toward the open hole. A funeral worker stomped down hard, trapping it under his heel. His leg shook. Ethan nodded at the cap. "By the cap," he said, voice sharp. "Don't touch the needle." The worker lifted it carefully, holding it at arm's length. Inside, a murky amber liquid shimmered. Ethan's jaw clenched. "That looks exactly like what I saw in the medical fridge," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Labeled Protocol 0, restricted." Guests turned toward a tall man in the second row, expensively dressed. Hospital ID badge still clipped to his belt. He'd come straight from rounds. Dr. Marcus Rowan. His face had gone the color of old paper. "Doctor," Lydia said slowly, voice shredding, "what is Protocol 0? Rowan swallowed. "It's a cardiac support medication for end-stage patients." "It eases." "You're lying," Ethan cut in. He yanked his cracked phone from his pocket. "I recorded you," he said, "because something about your voices didn't sound like compassion. It sounded like a plan." Rowan took a half step back, eyes darting toward the exit. Victor's voice cut through the air like a blade. "Don't." Ethan stepped closer to the podium microphone, holding the phone near the speaker. A few cameras turned, zooming in. He hit play. Rowan's voice spilled out clinical and cold. "Once Protocol 0 is in, her heart will slow to a crawl. Brain activity will dip. To standard scans, she'll look gone." Victor's voice followed, icy. "Good. The sooner she's in the ground, the sooner the board stops circling." In the recording, Rowan whispered, "If anyone checks," and Victor cut him off. "They won't. I've already arranged the waiver. Quick service. Closed case." The clip ended. Every face turned toward Victor. The grief suit he wore suddenly looked like a costume someone had put on wrong. "You wanted this," Lydia whispered. "You wanted her to die." Victor laughed once, short, brittle. She was never going to let go, he said, of the company, of control. I lived in her shadow while she treated me like a footnote. I was done. Lydia stepped closer, trembling with rage. So you chose a coffin? Victor's gaze slid over the crowd, searching for sympathy and finding only cameras, only witnesses. If the world believes she died of a tragic heart failure, he shrugged, then the world moves on. And I finally get what should have been mine. Security closed in, arms out. Step back, an officer barked. Victor glared at Ethan, hatred sharp and personal now. You think you're a hero, he sneered. You're just a man with a mop. Maybe, Ethan said, voice low. But at least my hands aren't covered in the blood of someone who trusted me. Red and blue lights flickered beyond the tent walls. Sirens climbed the hill like fate. This was no longer a funeral. It was a crime scene. A phone buzzed in someone's pocket, then another. A reporter glanced at her screen, face draining of color. Breaking. Board emergency session, Voss funeral incident labeled publicity stunt. The headline spread like wildfire through the crowd. And the comments were already calling Ethan a liar. They were already rewriting the story. Hours after the cemetery chaos, the world had split into two versions. The one witnesses saw, and the one being spun in boardrooms by people who hadn't been there at all. At the Voss estate, the world shrank to a small conference room and a soft orange fire. Rain tapped the windows like nervous fingers. Lydia sat upright in a leather chair, exhaustion in her posture. A porcelain cup of tea sat untouched on the table. Ethan perched opposite her in his still damp uniform, backpack at his feet, hands trembling like he'd run a marathon with his soul. Between them lay the cracked phone like a weapon. A knock interrupted the room. A house manager stepped in, pale, holding a tablet. The board is meeting now, he said. They want Victor reinstated. Temporarily. Lydia's jaw tightened. He tried to kill her in front of witnesses. They're calling it grief. A panic response. The manager's voice dropped. Her accounts are frozen. Tower security is being reassigned. Victor's interim team moved before the cuffs closed. Ethan felt heat crawl up his neck. Even now, the system was trying to sand down what happened into something acceptable. Lydia took the tablet, scrolled once, and exhaled sharply. Corporate power moves faster than handcuffs, she said bitterly. They can stall her authority. They can't stall the evidence. She looked up, eyes hard as steel. Let them try. The state has him now. The manager hesitated. Not yet. His lawyers filed an emergency injunction for custody of medical decisions. He paused, swallowing. If granted, Victor controls all treatment, visitors, discharge, everything while she's sedated. Lydia's voice dropped to ice. Then we keep her awake. Or we keep him buried. The manager nodded, backing out. Lydia's expression didn't waver. Then we move faster. Ethan's hands curled into fists. We make sure the evidence is impossible to ignore. Say it again, Lydia said gently, setting the tablet down. Why you came? Ethan stared at the phone. He could have said easy things. Because it was right. Because he couldn't watch a murder. Because the truth mattered. But the real answer had teeth. My son died in a hospital room while I argued with a billing office, he said, voice low. He was 5, Lydia's breath caught. His name was Noah, Ethan continued. Asthma, manageable, they said. But that night, I got trapped in procedures and signatures and authorization. I was too polite, too scared to make a scene. He looked up, eyes shining. By the time I forced my way through, the monitors were flat. The fire cracked softly. I promised him, Ethan said, that if I ever saw someone dying while money and procedure stood in the way, I wouldn't stay quiet again. Lydia's eyes brimmed. So when I saw the rushed paperwork, the missing checks, the speed of the burial, when I heard Protocol Zero, I couldn't pretend it wasn't my business. She took a slow breath. How did you go from engineer to janitor? He laughed without humor. After Noah, everything collapsed, he said. My marriage, my job, my mind. I stopped being the man I used to be. Cleaning nights at Voss Tower became the only steady thing left. Lydia studied him like she could see a different man beneath the uniform. And yet, she murmured, you didn't keep your head down. Ethan shook his head. I tried. But people in those halls didn't see me. I was just the ghost with a cart. He swallowed. But I saw Amelia, working late, fighting investors who wanted shortcuts, signing help for people she'd never meet. She reminded me of who I used to be, someone who believed building things could help. Lydia reached across the table and rested her hand over his firm. Today, she whispered, you did for her what no one did for your boy. Ethan flinched. I didn't save Noah. No, Lydia said softly. But you kept your promise to him. You didn't turn away again. Ethan's shoulders sagged under exhaustion. What if she doesn't wake up? He whispered. What if I only dragged your grief into a different kind of hell? Then she still had a chance, Lydia said. And the men who put her there will face what they did. She squeezed his hand once. And you, she added, voice sharpening with certainty, will not go back to scrubbing empty hallways like you were never here. Ethan shook his head fast. I don't need. This isn't about need, Lydia cut in. It's about what is right. Outside, the rain softened. Somewhere in an ICU room full of machines, a woman buried in advance fought her way back to the surface. 3 weeks later, the courthouse steps looked like a movie premiere. News vans lined the street. Cameras aimed like weapons. Reporters spoke in urgent tones as if the nation might blink and miss history. Inside, the courtroom filled before the first gavel struck. Business leaders, employees, ordinary citizens hungry to see the impossible. Amelia Voss alive. When Amelia entered, supported by Lydia, the room shifted. A faint scar traced her neck. Her dress was simple. Her eyes were not. Ethan followed in a borrowed suit that didn't fit, trying to become smaller than the spotlight that refused to let him. All rise, the bailiff boomed. Court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Elena Marsh presiding. The prosecutor opened with evidence. The injector pen, the irregular forms, the recording, each piece clicking together with the cold logic of intent. This was not mercy, the prosecutor said. This was a plan to erase a living woman for control of a billion-dollar empire, stopped only because one overlooked worker refused to stay silent. The defense tried to spin love and tragedy. Victor spoke of suffering, of grief. Rowan hid behind medical language. But the recording didn't care about performance. Victor's attorney stood, voice sharp. Your Honor, we move to exclude this so-called recording. No chain of custody, no authentication. In this era of AI-generated audio, we cannot accept. Objection, the prosecutor cut in. We have a digital forensics expert ready to testify. The judge nodded. Call your witness. A woman in a pressed suit took the stand. She spoke in clipped, precise sentences. I analyzed the file's metadata, hash signature, and waveform integrity. No splicing, no alterations. The recording is clean. The defense attorney objected again, but his voice had lost its edge. Evidence stacked up fast. A nurse testified that Amelia's chart had been altered in the middle of the night. A funeral director admitted he'd never seen paperwork move so fast, waivers arriving already signed, requests stamped urgent with no medical reason. Then Amelia herself took the stand. Her voice was quiet but steady. She described waking in darkness, unable to move, hearing muffled voices above her. I tried to scream, she said. Nothing came out. Even the reporters stopped typing. Victor's attorney objected until his voice went hoarse, but each objection only made the pattern clearer. Speed, secrecy, and a man who kept insisting there was no time for questions. When the injector pen was held up in an evidence bag, Victor stared at it, not with remorse, but with anger that his plan had failed. Then Ethan took the stand. He swore the oath. His hands trembled once, then steadied. The prosecutor asked the basics: his job, his past as an engineer, what he heard, what he saw, why he acted. The defense attorney rose, voice slick and sharp. "Mr. Reed," he purred, "you want this court to believe a janitor understood medical protocols and uncovered a conspiracy. Isn't it more likely you misinterpreted what you heard? That your grief, your history, made you see malice where there was none?" Ethan looked at him, then at the jury. "My son died because I stayed quiet and trusted the system to do the right thing on its own," he said softly. "I've lived with that regret every day." He held the attorney's gaze. "When I heard that call, when I saw a rushed burial and missing checks, I couldn't risk silence again. I didn't storm that funeral because I hate rich people." He paused. "I did it because I know what regret tastes like. And I wasn't willing to swallow it twice." The jury deliberated for hours. A bailiff entered with a folded note. He handed it to the judge. The courtroom went still. Judge Marsh opened it, read once, then looked up. "The jury requests to hear the recording again." Victor's jaw twitched. For just a second, something sharp and desperate flickered across his face. The recording played. Every word, every pause. The jury returned. The foreperson stood. Victor smiled, just once, thin and bitter. The judge nodded. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." The verdicts came down like iron. Victor Hawley, guilty, attempted murder, conspiracy, fraud. Dr. Marcus Rowan, guilty, conspiracy, malpractice, abuse of trust. The judge sentenced Victor to life. Rowan to years that would rot his reputation into dust. Victor shouted as cuffs snapped shut. "She forced me. She wouldn't share. I deserved control." But no one looked at him with pity. Amelia exhaled a long, shaking breath when the words life imprisonment rang through the room. "It's over," she whispered. Beside her, Ethan shook his head, half smiling through exhaustion. "No," he said. "It's the first day you're really free." Voss Tower's lobby looked different now. The massive LED wall that once looped glossy ads displayed a single sentence in clean white text. "Nitrogen monoxide 1 is invisible here." Ethan stood beneath it, feeling absurdly exposed. No mop, no cart, just his boots and a visitor badge with his name printed clearly, like the building had finally learned it. Amelia stepped beside him. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Strange," he admitted. "Like I snuck into somewhere I'm not allowed." She smiled, small but real. "You've always been allowed," she said. "You were just never invited." They walked past security. The guards nodded respectfully now, eye contact included. On the 50th floor, the executive boardroom overlooked the city like a throne room of glass. The chairs were still expensive, but the air felt different. Less smug, more awake. Amelia placed a thick folder on the table. "This is our new ethics and safety charter," she said. "No more backroom shortcuts. No more signing lives away behind closed doors. We don't just build smart devices. We respect the humans who use them." The board members murmured, some relieved, some calculating. One cleared his throat. "And Mr. Reed?" he asked, glancing at Ethan. "He's what, exactly? Your bodyguard? Moral compass?" Amelia didn't blink. "Special advisor," she said. "Systems integrity and human impact." Ethan nearly choked. "I'm what?" he whispered. "You heard me," she murmured back. "You built a device in your spare time that caught what professionals missed. You see cracks in systems because you fell through them. That's expertise." Ethan felt eyes on him. The old reflex, apologize, retreat, disappear, rose like a tide. Instead, he looked out at the city below. The hospital where Noah died, the streets where he slept, the tower where he'd been invisible. "I'm no executive," he said quietly. "Good," Amelia replied. "We have enough of those." What we need are people who remember what it feels like when someone at the top decides your life is a line item. A small laugh rippled around the table, not mocking, surprised, maybe hopeful. And Ethan, still in the same boots, stood a little straighter. A year later, the hilltop cemetery looked ordinary again. No tents, no chandeliers, just grass, wind, and quiet. A new headstone stood a few yards from the spot where Amelia had almost been lowered into the earth. Noah Reed, loved beyond measure. Ethan knelt there, tracing the carved letters with his thumb. A small toy car sat on the grass, chipped from years of being carried in pockets like a prayer. "Hey, buddy," he murmured. "I brought you somewhere today." Footsteps crunched behind him. Amelia stood there with Lydia, keeping a respectful distance, just enough to show presence, just enough to honor grief without intruding. "We wouldn't be here without you," Amelia said softly. It felt wrong not to say thank you. Ethan nodded, throat tight. Later, at a quiet gathering on the estate, nothing extravagant, just warm, Zoe tugged Ethan's sleeve. "Dad," she whispered, "Ms. Voss says you have to say something." He groaned. "I'm not a speeches guy," Zoe grinned. "You yelled at rich people at a funeral." "You'll be fine." Ethan stepped up, the crowd settling. "A year ago," he began, "I was the guy everyone looked through. Then I shouted stop and it saved a life." He paused, letting that truth sit in the air. "So here's what I learned. The people you ignore in hallways often see the truth first. If you ever witness something that could save someone, don't wait for permission." He looked around, eyes steady. "Would you speak up if everyone in the room hated you for it? Tell your answer in the comments. Like this story if it moved you, and subscribe for the next one. Because sometimes the difference between a burial and a new dawn is just one voice refusing to stay silent.